Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you for joining us this afternoon, and we still have a few more people making their way into the call. Thank you for joining us for today. My name is Matt Morrow. I'm president of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce, and really grateful that you could be with us for this call today. We're very pleased to welcome as our special guest today, Senator Josh Hawley. Senator Hawley is going to provide us with a very timely update about the federal COVID-19 response efforts, including I think an update on some critical business assistance programs and some of those even making news even within the past hour. So eager to hear from him about that, and also to give us some insight into a potential fourth phase of relief legislation for businesses and individuals. If you've not already, I would encourage you to spend time visiting our website on your COVID-19 and business assistance questions. We do our very best to bring you all kinds of up-to-date information. It's sorted neatly within those areas of greatest need for businesses, for federal assistance, resources, to local response efforts, to unemployment insurance. All of those questions can be answered at springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus, and that's updated daily. Lots of new information coming on there every single day. Also, I want to encourage you to please reach out to us with your COVID-19 concerns, experiences, and challenges. The feedback from our members is directly informing our advocacy efforts on your behalf during this crisis, and so we just really need to hear from you. You can share those with us at the email address covid19info@springfieldchamber.com. Again, that's covid19info@springfieldchamber.com. With that, I'm going to jump right into the program and introduce our guest today, U.S. Senator Josh Hawley. We have captured some questions that you have submitted for him in advance, and we'll try to get to as many of those as time allows today. In addition to that, if you have questions that come up during the course of today's discussion, something you'd like a little bit of a deeper dive on anything that the Senator references or mentions today, you can email those questions to Lauren Musto on our team. Her email address is lmusto@springfieldchamber.com. Again, that's LMUSTOE@springfieldchamber.com, LMUSTOE@springfieldchamber.com, and we'll do our best to get to those as well. Josh Hawley took office in January of 2019, representing Missouri in the United States Senate. He serves on multiple Senate committees, including Judiciary, Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs, and Small Business and Entrepreneurship. He previously served as Missouri's Attorney General, and most recently was appointed to serve on a White House task force focused on the reopening of the economy. And he joins us today by conference call. Senator Hawley, welcome. We have a great crowd on the line today representing Springfield's business community. We're so grateful that you could join us today. I'd like to start by just asking you to overview a little bit of what you see as the federal response to the coronavirus pandemic. What's that looked like so far, including some of the programs there and even maybe some of the challenges, and also where you see us heading in terms of future legislation recovery efforts. Senator Hawley, welcome. Thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Matt, for having me. Thanks for everybody else for joining us on this Tuesday afternoon. It's great to talk with you. I wish that we were together and visiting under different circumstances, but it is great to be with you nonetheless on this Tuesday, and it's great to be home here in Springfield. I've been here now since Congress went out of session. I thought it was important to be here in the state as we are in the midst of this crisis and to get to talk with as many of you as possible and just be here on the ground. And we have worked over the last 2.5 weeks with quite a number of you who are on the call today, I know, to help you apply for emergency disaster loans, to apply for the Paycheck Protection loans, to work on individual assistance issues, other questions that you have had. And I know I think there's some churches on the line today. We've particularly enjoyed working with you. It's been a challenge at times to make sure that our nonprofits, religious nonprofits, get what they deserve and are entitled to under the statute, under the coronavirus relief legislation. But we've been delighted to work with you, and I think we've made some real headway there. So thank you so much to each of you for all that you're doing and for standing strong during this unprecedented time. And I think I'll just begin there by saying something that should be obvious to all of us now, I think, but really it's worth reminding ourselves what a historic moment this is. This is the most significant public health crisis in any of our lifetimes. You've got to go back to the 1918 influenza epidemic to find something on this scale in this country. And of course, back then, the government did not pursue health mitigation measures on anywhere near the scale, I mean, not remotely, anything like the government, federal and state and local have done as part of this crisis. So this is really without precedent in our country's history. And it's a health crisis without precedent. It's led to an economic crisis that is without precedent since at least the 1930s. So it's an extraordinary time, a really extraordinary time. and we will. There's no question that we're going to get through it in terms of breaking the back of this epidemic. I think that we are on the way. The curve is bending in the state of Missouri. I hope we can get open back up as soon as is feasible. But we have a lot of work to do in getting our workers back to work and getting our businesses reopened and getting stood back up so that we can avert a potential humanitarian disaster with the loss of jobs, the loss of income, the loss of revenues, the loss of ability to literally put food on the table for many, many people in this country. So, and of course, in the midst of all that, we've got to keep taking mitigation steps to make sure that the disease, the virus doesn't flare again. So we've got a lot of work to do. It's an extraordinary time in our history, but hey, Missourians are extraordinary people and Americans are extraordinary people. And I have every confidence that not only will we get through this, I think we'll look back and see that this was a real inflection point in our history when, in some ways, the 21st century really truly began, and America emerged in a new way as the leader of the 21st century and began to reshape the terms of the international order, the terms of the global trade order, the global health order. I think that American leadership is going to be enhanced and even more critical coming out of this crisis, and I'm happy to answer questions about that. But, you know, the first thing, the most immediate thing is we've got to address the crisis that is upon us. Let me give you an update about the legislation that is currently before the United States Senate and may come up for passage as early as this afternoon, potentially in a couple of hours. This new legislation allots $310 billion to the Paycheck Protection Program. That would make for a total of $670 billion that will have been spent on that program since its inception now about 3 weeks ago. That is a significant plus up for this program that is administered through the Small Business Administration. I know a number of you on the phone, because we've worked with you, a number of you have applied for these loans. These are loans that are available through your local lender. They are guaranteed by the federal government. Lenders get a 5% fee for processing them, so it's good for lenders. They do well by processing them. Again, 100% guaranteed by the federal government. You can apply for a loan sized up to 250% of your payroll as of, I believe, February 15th. Your payroll as it existed then or as it exists today, I think whichever is larger. So you can apply for a loan up to 250% of that or $10 million, the lesser of those two. The loan is interest-free for a year, and then at the 1 year mark, it begins accruing at 1% interest. But if you spend the money, 75% on it, on your payroll, on maintaining your payroll, and if you use the other 25% for utilities, healthcare, mortgage, rent, then the loan is 100% forgivable, and it is essentially a grant. So this was a very oversubscribed program. The money ran out very quickly, and I think it was an important lifeline for small business, and I know that a number of you have loans that are pending, and one of the reasons I think it's important to pass additional funding is for those of you who have been waiting, those of you who have been told by your bank, well, you've got to come back and apply again. We want to make sure you get the opportunity to do that. I will say, however, that I think the limitations of this program are becoming very apparent now as time goes on. We have had some issues with the larger banks preferring their existing customers, the larger banks preferring folks who already have revolving lines of credit with them. There are various other administrative issues. You've got some folks, some large corporations who frankly probably shouldn't be getting this money, have managed to get it. It's being reported in the press. So a lot of that is this program just really is not designed to handle, I think, the increasing need that we see. We've got unemployment at 22 million in this country now. It's going to go higher this week. And this program has been an important lifeline to small business. But I think we're bumping up against its limitations now. My own view is Congress needs to take additional action to secure the payrolls and the jobs of every worker in this country who has been affected by the COVID-19 crisis and the associated shutdown. So we can talk more about that, and I'm happy to spell that out more. But I think we're going to need to not only get the additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program today, but we're going to need to consider, I think, broader relief that will really get us ready to work again and will allow you to get your businesses open again when we get the green light to do that. The other thing I would say is that in today's package will include $75 billion per hospital. That's in addition to the original $100 billion that was passed not quite 3 weeks ago. And today's package will also include another approximately $60 billion for those emergency disaster loans. You know, these emergency disaster loans are really important. Again, I know a number of you have applied for those. Those loans they're not forgivable. They're a little different than the Paycheck Protection loans, but they are still quite favorable. And you're supposed to get a $10,000 cash advance within 3 days of being approved for the loan. That has not been happening, as I'm sure many of you are very frustratingly aware, and it's much to my deep frustration as well. And so I have publicly and repeatedly called on the SBA, worked with the SBA, urged the SBA to get their act together and get these loans out the door, get the cash advances out the door. And here again, I think we're just seeing the limits of the SBA. The SBA just isn't able to handle programs of this size and scale, which is why, frankly, I think we're going to need to do something different and better on a going forward basis. But for now, this will include an additional, today's package, $60 billion, $50 billion of that in loans, $10 billion of that in grants for emergency disaster relief. And I think that will be, I hope, very helpful. And we're happy to work with you on that for those of you who need help applying for it. I think the last thing I would say before I take your questions, which I am very eager to do and will probably be most useful to you, the last thing I would say is my own view about what Congress needs to do next after we replenish here the Paycheck Protection Program for the short term. I think it's time to do something that will focus squarely on employment and on the needs of business to be able to rehire your workers, to keep your workers on payroll, and on the needs of workers, frankly, to have that job security that comes from knowing that they've got employment, that they've got it now, that they're going to have it when the economy reopens and will allow them to get back to work. And that's why I proposed a plan that would cover at least 80% of payroll. That's 80% of wages for every worker, and meaning then every business in the country. That relief would run, in my proposal, up through the national median wage. So it would cover all of, if your employees make at the median wage or below, it would cover all of that, and would be available again to every single worker. It would come with incentives, financial payments to businesses to rehire the workers that they have laid off. It would last for the duration of this national emergency, as has been declared by the president. It would also come with investment credits on the back end. So once the economy is reopened, every business would get significant investment credits to apply toward new spending that you want to do, need to do, projects you've had to defer, capital investments that you need to make, other costs that need to be paid. I also think it would be prudent to allow for, as part of this program, part of this wage support and job protection program, give businesses 20% of their revenues, a grant of 20% of their revenues to help you cover your overhead, your rent, your utilities, and so on. My view is that something of this scale, which has worked very well in other places and other countries, I think that it is necessitated given the scale of the government shutdown. Again, the government has taken unprecedented measures to protect public health, and that has had an unprecedented effect. And so we find ourselves in a position where we need to move with boldness in order to protect the public health, but we also need to move with boldness to address the fallout from the health crisis. And that is why I believe that a future phase 4 needs to focus on employment. It needs to focus on getting workers on their feet and getting businesses back on your feet so that we can get this economy reopened and come out of this strong. That, I think, gives you a sense of the state of play as I see it. I'm very happy to take your questions. Again, thank you for what you're doing, and I just want to say to you that please be encouraged. We are going to get through this crisis. The end, I think, is increasingly in sight. We have vaccines that are underway, under development. In fact, they're not under development. They're in testing. The development's done. So they are in testing as we speak. We can see that the curve in our state is being noticeably bent. Here in this area, thank the Lord, we have been spared the worst of the sort of crisis that we've seen in places like New York, and that's good. Thanks to all of our healthcare professionals who are working around the clock. Many of you know that my family, my sister is a physician, and she's at work as we speak. seeing patients. So thank you to those of you who work on the front lines, advise people on the front lines of this crisis. And we are going to emerge from this victorious. We just got to make sure that we emerge from this stronger than we were before, and that we're in a position to do that. So with that, Matt, I will turn it back over to you, and I'm happy to take questions.
Senator Hawley, thank you so much for that summary, and especially, I know a lot of people on this call are very glad to hear your news about this progress that's being made even today on these lifeline programs. Those are, as you described, critical lifelines for small businesses, especially right now. I'm also really interested in just doing a little deeper dive maybe on some of what you're describing in terms of potential for a phase 4. The proposal that you laid out is a bold proposal. It's big, it's unprecedented, as you said, in the way that these challenges that we face are unprecedented. Are you hearing anything about some of the timeline for phase 4, what the thought process is as you talk about this particular proposal idea with your colleagues in the Senate? What are you hearing out there? What are some things that could maybe provide a little context in terms of what those next steps look like?
I think that we'll turn to phase 4 in earnest once this interim legislation is adopted and once we've extended the lifeline of the Paycheck Protection Program. But I think that, again, the limitations of that program are becoming increasingly clear. And I hope that there will be a realization that we are going to need to do more and do it quickly in order to help our economy get back up on its feet and help our workers get on their feet. I can tell you that I've had a lot of productive conversations with the White House, with the Treasury, with my colleagues, and also with the Senate Democrats, members from across the aisle. I think that there's just a growing realization that with 22 million people unemployed, and that number, unfortunately, is sure to grow this week. I'm sure on the Thursday jobs report, we'll see, unfortunately, many, many, many more Americans unemployed. We're now at an unemployment level that we have not seen in this country since the 1930s. We just cannot afford to stand by and watch the roller coaster go down, 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 and wonder where the bottom is. I don't think that American workers should be forced to ride the roller coaster to the bottom. I don't think that American business should be forced to ride the roller coaster to the bottom. We need to take steps now to get our markets back up and running and get people back and able to work as soon as we have the health clearance to do so. So, I think there's a growing awareness of that on both sides of the aisle, and I look forward to working on it. And all I can tell you is, I will continue to put my shoulder to the plow and push for this and push for everything that is needed in this crisis to make sure that we come out of this thing whole and are able to surge ahead, because we're going to need a surge. You all are living it day by day. This unprecedented economic downturn. We're going to need a powerful surge to come out of this in order to make families whole, workers whole, businesses whole. So that we've got a lot of growing to do, and we need to be positioned to do that.
Well, I think to that end, just jumping off that point, Senator, last week the administration provided the Opening Up America Again framework as a tool for governors to use as they work to make plans at the state level, and even local officials to make plans to reopen their own local economies. And as we mentioned, we mentioned in your introduction, you were recently appointed to serve on a White House task force focusing on the reopening of the economy. So kind of think you may have a unique perspective here to share. Would you mind maybe sharing your perspective on this path to reopening and recovery for Missouri? How do you feel about the plan as it's laid out, or that framework? And then any insights on discussions at the task force level or with the administration?
We had our first task force meeting at the end of last week. And it was very interesting, very illuminating. I think that if to summarize in my own words what the White House's approach is and the president's approach, I really think it is to give governors and local leaders, regional leaders, the tools and the flexibility they need to make these decisions at the regional level, region by region, in a way that's good for their communities and for their region. And I think that's smart because, the needs of Southwest Missouri are different than New York City. And heck, the needs of Southwest Missouri may be different than St. Louis or than Kansas City. So we need our local leaders and state leaders need to have the tools and flexibility, which includes, by the way, the health data to be able to make good decisions that are good for our region and to be able to do that in a timely fashion. And so I think that one critical component of that is standing up additional testing. We're doing, I think it's about 500,000 tests a day in this country, and the state of Missouri has done tens of thousands of tests. Missouri's actually done per capita more tests than a lot of states, and that's great. But we need to do more. And certainly I know that having talked with state officials here, state officials in Missouri want to do more. They want to do a lot more, like 10 times more. And that would be great, because the more data that we have, the better we are going to know just, again, what the size of the impact is, and where cases are still occurring and what we need to do to isolate those cases. So this is one of the reasons that working with the state of Missouri, I have been pressing FEMA to send additional testing resources to the state of Missouri, and why I have advocated from the very beginning for more testing kits, more components. We actually have got a pretty fair amount of capacity to run the tests in Missouri. We've stood up, thanks to our hospitals, thanks to our state lab, we've stood up a pretty fair amount of capacity. We need more testing kit components so that we can run more tests. So I think that's a key part of that, and getting more testing available will be key to giving local leaders those data points. I will also say the other thing is that seeing these antibody studies, I don't know if you all are following this, but there are now a number of antibody studies that have been done and are being done as we speak, are being fielded, that measure who has the antibodies to the virus, which tells you, is actually a lot more illuminating than just positive tests, because it tells you not only who has it, but who has had it, and what the prevalence is in the community. And what we found with the early tests that have come out, two of them have come out of California. There's one in New York, one in Ohio rather. There's one being fielded in New York right now, and they keep sort of, this is all in our country, and then other countries are doing them. As these antibody tests come in, they're finding, and the returns are early, let me just emphasize, but they're finding a pretty consistent pattern, which is that the prevalence of people with antibodies in the population is between 30 and 80 times the number of reported cases. What that suggests is that this disease, this virus, is very contagious, but that its fatality rate may be quite a bit lower than we initially thought and than the national models initially predicted. Of course, that would be tremendous news. So I say all of that to say that these are hopeful signs, and one of the other things that we've got to do is we've got to do more antibody testing so that we can get a better picture of how widespread the disease, the virus actually has been, and what the true fatality rate is. But bottom line, Matt, I think that the White House's approach here to giving state and local leaders the flexibility to make this decision in a way that makes sense for their region is exactly the right thing. Because I personally, Missouri shouldn't be held up to what Massachusetts or New York needs. Their needs should be met by, should be determined rather by their local situation. Our needs and our decisions ought to be determined by our local situation. And I think we're on the right path for that.
Senator, I'm very interested in your thoughts on testing. We received a number of questions on testing, and I think most of what people are thinking about is more in that diagnostic testing space. But your thoughts on antibody testing seems like a really important component of this. I guess if I could just combine some of those questions, we had several questions kind of about how do you feel like our testing capacity looks right now, and you've addressed some of that, and then specifically what role does the federal government have to play in helping to expand our testing capacity, whether that be diagnostic or antibodies in either case. We have heard some reports that a deal should it be forthcoming on expanding the PPP program might also include resources for testing. Just didn't know if you had some perspective to add to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the PPP deal will include additional money for testing. In fact, it includes $25 billion for a national testing effort. The deal that I think will come before the Senate later this afternoon. So that will be that's a very significant amount of resources devoted to the testing question, and 11 billion of that will go directly to states. So that'll be good, frankly. I mean, that'll be help with the capacity, or help rather increase our ability to do the test. In terms of testing capacity, Missouri, for instance, actually has quite a bit of capacity in terms of labs available to do the tests. And again, between our hospitals and some private labs, and then also the state lab, we've got the capacity to do a lot more testing. It's the components. It's the testing components. And can I just add here, something I think is critical for Congress to address, and Congress really needs to be the one to do it. One of the things we found about the components of these tests it's hard to get some of these components of the tests because some of the components are made overseas, including in China. And one of the things this crisis has exposed is our really terrible dependence in our critical medical supply chains and in other supply chains, but especially our medical ones, on overseas production, and in particular China. We have got to fix that. And we cannot find ourselves in this situation again where we are dependent on overseas production and Chinese production for basic drugs, basic protective equipment, basic testing components. So I've introduced legislation that would move that production back to the United States, that would require the medical producers in this country, the pharmaceutical producers, both pharmaceutical drugs and pharmaceutical devices, to manufacture a set number of their components in this country. I think that's not only good for us economically, it'll create jobs, but it's just also a basic matter of health security. And so that's an additional step, an important step the federal government needs to take. Only the federal government can take that step, obviously, given the national and trade ramifications. But I think that is vital. And again, I've introduced that legislation. I'll be pushing hard for that in these additional relief proposals.
Thank you, Senator. One of the questions that I wanted to relay to you from our one of our members is very indicative of questions we received from a fairly early stage in this process, which is kind of anticipating the return to work and reopening the economy in whatever stages those happen. Concern about a potential new set of liabilities that could exist for businesses when it comes to trying to manage their workforce, trying to keep everybody safe. There are a lot of health concerns here. There are certain high-risk populations. There are also privacy considerations for employees. Is there anything that you're hearing that Congress at the congressional level might be considering as a way to hold businesses harmless in this new reality as we enter these next phases of opening the economy?
Yeah, I think the liability question, I think, will be very much a topic of discussion in the next phase of relief. It's something that I've heard a lot from business folks and from workers as I've talked to them from across the state. And, I think that you're seeing a lot of concern from businesses who say that, listen, we'd like to, even those that are now designated essential and so can be open, but who care about the safety of their workers, so they don't want their workers in a dangerous situation, so they are erring on the side of sometimes extreme caution. And if the liability rules were different, or if the liability was borne by a different entity, then that might be different. So I think liability relief is something that we absolutely need to look at, and I strongly suspect that it will be a central topic of discussion going forward.
You mentioned a little while ago, Senator, the kind of the intersection of some of the limitations of the PPP program, while at the same time it's a really critical lifeline for employers. One of those limitations is that some employers are concerned about some of the timelines about the PPP loan program. That if they take it out and they've been put under a stay-at-home order, they can't operate, they get the loan. They don't have work for their employees to do, but there's an 8-week clock that's ticking. They want to be able to get up and running as quickly as possible. Are you hearing anything from your constituents or businesses as it relates to some of the challenges and limitations or unintended consequences of these programs interacting with each other, particularly when, in some cases, employers have laid off employees or furloughed employees?
Yes, and this is, as you say, this is, I think, one of the limitations of this program as it's currently designed. You're right about the 8 weeks. The rule is that once loans are dispersed to the borrower, the funds have to be spent with 8 weeks on approved uses in order to be eligible for forgiveness. Now, you could spread out your loan over longer than 8 weeks if you want, but then you'll have to pay 1% interest on it. And the thinking when PPP was stood up several weeks ago is that this would be an incentive for businesses not to lay off workers and to keep people on payroll. And I totally get that. And by the way, I mean, part of this program, and you should take advantage of it, if you get one of these loans or want to apply for one of these loans or have one, is that, it does allow you, even if you are closed down, you can still keep, because it covers 100% of your payroll. So you can still keep your folks employed, even if they're not able to come to work, and cover all of their payroll, including health care. The government will reimburse you for all of that. It covers all of that under this program. And so that's a nice feature. But the 8-week window, I think, really has caused a lot of heartache and headaches for small businesses, and also realizing that, their needs are probably not going to expire after 8 weeks. The other piece that has caused some issues is the 75% rule. In order to get the forgiveness, you have to spend 75% of your loan on payroll. Well, I mean, I don't need to tell you on this call that a lot of businesses, especially small business, they don't spend 75% on payroll. I mean, that's just not, you might spend 50% on payroll, but your overhead and other expenses make up a lot larger proportion, again, just depending on your business. So I understand. And by the way, that 75% rule is not actually in the legislation. The Treasury Department just created that rule as part of the program. And I understand why they did it, but it just, it's to conserve funds, it's to try and focus on preserving as many jobs as possible. But again, this program has got its limits, and I think we are bumping up against them. So I just want to assure those of you who are in line for one of these loans and you've applied and your local lender said, oops, it's out of money, we're going to replenish this. So you are going to have the opportunity, and we want to make sure that if you need a loan and if you qualify, you get it. So, and we're here, by the way, we've worked with many of you directly. And if you're having trouble or you have questions, please reach out to me in my office. That's what we're here to do. But having said all of that, again, I feel it is important on a going forward basis to do something that is easier, that is simpler for the business, where you don't have to apply for this stuff, but where the federal government reverses through your payroll. What I propose is a payroll tax rebate that is fully advanceable. It's like a negative tax. So the government would just reverse back through your payroll, through the sort of payroll tax mechanism. They would reverse back to you payments to cover your payroll, as well as cover portions of your lost revenue for your operating expenses. So that, I think, is a much simpler, more direct way to go. And I'd rather spend the money by helping people keep their jobs and businesses stay afloat than I would on spending it on unemployment when people have lost their job and a lot of times lost their health care and have lost all their security.
That's interesting juxtaposition there, because one of the questions we had is, do you foresee any further unemployment assistance being provided from the federal level, any extension or ongoing of that? And then the other question is, I think certainly what you're describing, Senator Hawley, would be welcome news to employers. I think there are a lot of businesses that are trying to figure out how they can emerge as strong as possible from this downturn, and from the unprecedented impact that it's had. There's a lot of cost to all of these things. Is it too early to talk about debt impact or anything like that, or are you thinking about what that means for the country long term as well? Not just the proposal you're outlining, but all of the work that's happening.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, it is certainly, as coming from a guy, I've only been in the Senate for 1 year, and in that time I have voted against multiple appropriations bills and pieces of the budget. I voted against the overall CAPS agreement. I mean, I voted against this stuff because from my point of view, it contained gobs of wasteful spending. Just money that the federal government, taxpayer money the federal government should not be spending, cannot afford to spend. And so I voted against that stuff in my brief time in the Senate over and over and over, much, I might add, to the frustration of Senate leadership. But hey, you sent me there to stand up for our convictions. And I just don't think that, in this part of the country, certainly I personally don't believe in wasteful spending. Having said that, I don't think this is wasteful spending. I mean, let me put it this way. $25 million to the Kennedy Center, which some of you may have read about, which the Democrats, at least I think it was the Democrats, stashed into the last congressional bill. That's wasteful spending. That's the kind of garbage that shouldn't be in these bills. Nothing against the Kennedy Center, but I mean, come on. However, saving people's jobs, helping businesses stay open. After all, none of you on this call whose businesses are closed, and even those of you whose businesses are designated essential and are running, but in these extraordinary times, none of you did anything wrong here. I mean, this isn't like a normal economic downturn where there was, some issue in the market, some people made some bad business decisions. These things happen in a free market. That's not this. This is a government-induced shutdown in order to deal with an unprecedented health crisis. So my view is that taking targeted action, and you don't want to throw money away, but taking targeted action to save jobs and to save businesses and to emerge from this thing in a position to reopen and surge, that is not wasteful spending. That is needed spending so that we can have an economy that functions. Because if we don't do that and take these steps, there won't be an economy to reopen. And my gosh, spending that money on the question on unemployment about whether any more will be coming, that the last round of relief actually contained very, very, very generous unemployment support. It added $600 of unemployment payments per week to every state in the country. So in Missouri, where we paid $325 a week before, now folks can get $925 to $925 a week. Very, very generous benefits, and that's fine. The problem is that for a lot of folks, they're being sent to the unemployment line because the employer says, well, I can't pay you that, and I don't have any work for you, and I can't cover your payroll, so you're going to have to go to the unemployment line. Well, when that happens, sure, they may get the unemployment benefits, but they lose their job security. You lose your workers and your workforce. A lot of times they lose their health care. I mean, we just don't want that. And so I would rather spend this money by keeping jobs and maintaining that employer-employee relationship than I would in having mass unemployment from folks who've been forced out of work.
You're going to spend a lot either way. That sounds like maybe the better approach too. Are there things that business people can be doing to support those efforts? Obviously, as I said, those are things that would, I think, be welcome to employers.
I think the main thing you can do is, raise your voices with the other members of the congressional delegation. We've got some great representation in Congress in the state, but let them know. Let the other members know what you need, and particularly for those of you who have struggled to get a paycheck protection loan or have been turned away by your bank, or maybe you didn't qualify for some reason. I just think it's so important that policymakers understand, lawmakers understand, that the situation here is urgent, and that also we shouldn't make this too complicated. I mean, we shouldn't ask businesses to have to jump through 3,000 hoops and fill out who knows how many pages of applications and go through all of this process to get relief they need today. Actually, you needed it yesterday. To get that kind of relief, to keep their workers on payroll, you shouldn't have to go through all of that in this crisis that you had no part in causing. So I think the best thing you can do is tell everybody else. I mean, tell other members of the delegation, tell state leaders that you need more relief, direct relief. You're not asking for a handout. You're asking to be able to operate your business, to get your workers back on payroll, and to get ready to work. And I can just tell you, I'm talking to every one of my colleagues and everybody who will listen to me. And even those who won't listen to me, I'm still talking to them. But I can tell you right now, this kind of thing coming from you carries a lot more weight than it does coming from me. My colleagues, they'll listen to me, okay, that's an interesting idea, Josh. But if they hear it from you, they'll say, oh, well, we got to have it. We got to have it because our local leaders they're telling us. So your voice carries enormous weight. And I think making that voice heard. Now, having said that, I don't want to be the one giving you homework on this call. I'm here to get homework from you. So we are here to help you answer your questions, apply for loans. If you apply for a disaster relief grant, my office is working around the clock. We may be in recess, but we are not on vacation in the Hawley Senate office. We are fully operational, and we are working. Again, we've had the privilege of working with many of you. We are working round the clock to help you. So that's what I'm here to do. And so please, if there's something we can help you with, please don't hesitate to reach out to us.
I want to take just a moment to since you mentioned that, Senator, to compliment your team. They've been tremendous to work with here locally and also in Washington for our team as well. Just has been a good, excellent experience, and they're under a lot of pressure right now too, as I know you know well. We have just a few minutes left on the call, and I held a couple of questions because they were a little more narrowly focused. I didn't want to miss something that's more broadly focused. But if time permitted, I would come back to these. So if I could just hit you with a couple of these, you may have something on it, may not, but on the PPP expansion program, that plan, of course, is for small businesses, employers of 500 or fewer. 501c3 nonprofits have access to those funds as well. But there was kind of a narrow band of 501c6 organizations. That's chambers of commerce, professional associations, trade associations that were specifically left out of the first round. Any word on whether this expansion includes an opportunity for those 501c6 organizations to be involved, or C7s as well?
I do not believe that this expansion today will do that. And again, this is, I think, we're confronting some of the limitations of the existing program. Today's legislation, as reports of it are coming in, and by the way, we got the text for this just before I got on this call, so it's all happening in real time.
Breaking news.
Exactly, it really is. My staff is reviewing it, and I read out to you the top lines that I had just gotten. So you are the first people to know in the state, because we had just gotten the text. But it does not make any substantive or programmatic changes to the existing infrastructure. It just essentially replenishes it. So you're right, Matt, that the existing program does cover 501c3s. It also covers 501c19s, which are veterans organizations, and that include the 501c3s includes religious nonprofits. And again, I know that I believe there's some religious nonprofits on the line, and we've worked with a number of you in the state because initially, despite what the statute says, and the statute, by the way, is very clear. It says that 501c3s and nonprofits, religious nonprofits, are covered. But initially, the Small Business Administration was telling banks, no, actually, if you're a church or a religious ministry, you're not covered. That we had to have a little public fight about that, and I'm not very popular at the moment with some of the leadership at the SBA, but we got you covered. So I don't care if I'm currently not their favorite person. We were able to get churches and religious nonprofits what you deserve, because it's right there in the statute. I mean, it's in the bill. So I'm proud we got that done. But Matt, as you allude to, there are additional bans here in the nonprofit world and in the for-profit world who just aren't covered under this program, but who have workers and who have needs and who have payroll to meet. And that's why I think we need to do something that is at once simpler, but also bigger, broader. And that's what I'll be pushing for here as we move to phase 4.
Senators, we have a large tourism industry here in Southwest Missouri, amusement parks, theaters, large meeting centers, sporting events. Knowing that our new normal is probably finding a way to live and work with this virus in our lives for a while, I wonder if you have any thoughts on what the resumption of business operations might look like for some of those kinds of venues. How do you see these larger attractions being handled in the broader economy here or more broadly in the country?
Yeah, great question. And of course, you're absolutely right about the key role that those businesses play in our state and in our region. Obviously, right here in Southwest Missouri, that tourism is a big part of our economy and a vital lifeline. So, and I was spending time actually today, earlier today before I got on this call, talking to leaders of the tourism industry in our state and nationally about this very question. Here's my impression. These are just my impressions so far. I think it will depend a little bit on it will look different region to region. Again, I think some regions will open up more quickly and more fully than others, just depending on the prevalence of the disease in the region. So that's good news for us in Southwest Missouri and Missouri in general and Southwest Missouri in particular, because our curve looks a heck of a lot better than many other places in the country. Certainly a lot better than say New York, portions of California, Florida, Louisiana. Our curve looks much better. And again, thanks to the outstanding work of, frankly, the people of this state and our healthcare professionals here in Southwest Missouri, the curve, knock on wood, looks pretty darn good. That's no reason for complacency, but it's something that we can certainly be thankful for. Number one. Number two, testing plays a huge role, and I want to emphasize again the importance of antibody testing. You know, one of the things we found with the testing, the traditional testing, is that you rarely get a false positive out of it, although occasionally that happens, but there are a lot of false negatives. And somebody who maybe has already had the virus and didn't even know that she had it, or had a very mild case, you know, that person might test negative. And so you know, we need to do more testing of all kinds. But I think for opening back up our economy on a long-term basis, I think that the antibody testing is so critical, because that's really going to give health professionals and all business leaders, everybody, that's going to give us a lot clearer picture of how widespread the disease has been, where the centers of it are, and also what the real fatality rate is, and who it hits the hardest. So it looks like, again, it's all very preliminary data, but it looks like that while anybody can get the disease at any age, and you know, it looks like young kids are almost always asymptomatic. It doesn't have much effect on them, thank the Lord. But you know, we know that people in their 20s and their 30s and their 40s can all be admitted to the hospital, but it looks like that the fatalities are pretty heavily concentrated in the at-risk elderly and those with underlying health conditions in the vulnerable population. So, you know, if that's we need to know that. That's useful information we really need to know for sure, because that'll change how we shape our mitigation efforts going forward. And then the other thing is that, again, if let's say that there are 50 times as many cases as are currently being publicly reported, boy, that really changes our health response. You know, that changes the whole picture of what this disease looks like, and it changes our ability to know, okay, who's most at risk, what are the most sensible mitigation steps. So we need more testing of all kinds, and we really need antibody testing on a large scale to be able to get a clear picture of this. And I think the clearer the picture we get of how widespread the virus has been and what its fatality rate is and who is most at risk, that will really help us target our health measures in a way that it's most effective, and that also allows us to get back to work and get people their jobs back as soon as we can.
Well, Senator Hawley, you've been so generous with your time today, and I'm grateful for the wide-ranging conversation. We've been able to cover a lot of ground. I want to be respectful of your time. I also want to let you know we had at various times, it looks like right at 230 participants on the call today, a diversity of attendees, large businesses, many small businesses, and really virtually every sector in our local economy here too. So grateful that you were able to spend this time with us today, and very much looking forward to doing this in person when we can do it under better circumstances.
Oh, I can't wait. I look forward to that too, Matt. And thanks to every single one of you this afternoon for your time. I know it's incredibly valuable, especially in this emergency situation. I just want to end where I began by saying thank you so much for all that you're doing. We are here for you. I'm here to, I work for you. You're my boss. So please, if there are questions that you have, questions you wanted to ask but you didn't get to today, you need help with something, we're here for you. Please reach out to us. You can reach out to any of our offices. Go to my website, hawley.senate.gov. You'll find numbers for all the offices. You can call any of them. You don't have to call the Southwest Missouri office just because you're from Southwest Missouri. Call any of them. You can email them. You can email me directly. Josh@joshhawley.com is my email address, so feel to email me. And we are here to help you. And the last thing I will say is, please be encouraged. We are going to beat this virus. I mean, we are on the way. We are going to break its back. In due time, we will have a vaccine where we will be able to vaccinate everybody. And we will relegate this virus to where it belongs, which is in the pages of history, where it will never come to bother us again. So that is coming. Our task in the meantime is to take the steps that we need to take in order to keep safe those who are vulnerable, while making sure that we can provide for families, for workers, and for businesses, so that we don't face an even greater humanitarian crisis. So there's a lot to do. It's an extraordinary time, but I have every confidence that we are going to emerge stronger than we were before. And I think it's going to be exciting. But in the meantime, I'm here for you. Thanks for all that you're doing.
Well, Senator, thank you very much. And thanks for your leadership in representing Missouri in the U.S. Senate, and for taking the time with us today. I also want to put in another plug for your team. Just really grateful for the chance to work with Clayton Campbell here in the Southwest Missouri office. He's just a great partner for our team as well, and represents you so well in Southwest Missouri. So thank you for that too. Also,
Absolutely. Thank you, everybody.
thanks so much, Senator. Also want to thank our members for joining us today and for your questions. Appreciate you engaging us and taking the time to be on the call with us. We know that you're working hard to deal with many challenges, and we hope to continue to bring you timely information that you need. We have some upcoming events in the works, so please just stay tuned for that and check the Chamber's website for continually updated information as well. That's springfieldchamber.com, and specifically in this case, springfieldchamber.com/coronavirus. Lots of resources there for you. We're so grateful for your membership. We're in this together, and we're here for you. Thank you for being a part of the Springfield Area Chamber of Commerce.